You've probably heard about the case of Dahmer or Vargas, who earned the nickname Hannibal Lecter of the Andes, right? And it seems like it's somewhere out there, far away. But sometimes a cannibal can turn out to be your neighbor. For example,
an old lady quietly cooking jelly from a naughty girl. What do you think about that?
And I'll show you another cannibal who is currently officially free. He lives in the same apartment where he used to cook people in the kitchen. Sometimes, delving into the study of criminal cases, I involuntarily catch myself thinking, how is this possible? How did the criminal manage to hide his misdeeds from others for so long? Could it be that right next door, behind the wall, lives a person with a dark past, and we don't even suspect it? Why did everything suddenly become so obvious only after the case was revealed? Indeed, who would think to suspect their neighbor from the staircase of being a serial criminal? We are accustomed to thinking of elderly women as slightly grumpy, gossip-loving grandmothers who are always vigilant guardians of order in the stairwells. But to imagine that such a seemingly harmless old lady could turn out to be a cold-blooded killer, let alone a cannibal, seems absurd. However, Sofia Ivanovna Zhukova, born in the distant year of 1939 and raised in the Nizhny Novgorod region, shattered all possible stereotypes. A professional butcher at a pig farm, she skillfully handled an axe until her retirement. Living in the quiet village of Berezovka near Khabarovsk, Sofia Ivanovna did not arouse suspicion. The only thing that could raise eyebrows was her tendency to argue and shout, especially after her husband's death. Growing more withdrawn, she couldn't stand noise and children playing near her house, threatening to chop them to pieces. But who could take these words seriously when they came from what seemed to be a harmless pensioner? At the end of 2005, in the small village of Berezovka, a tragic story unfolded. Little Nastya Alexeyenko, who was only 8 years old, didn't return home from school. It was immediately clear that this wasn't a case of running away. Nastya was too attached to home for such a step, and there was no reason for it. The only lead was her friend Vika, the last person who saw the schoolgirl alive. According to her, Nastya entered her apartment building accompanied by an elderly woman. As you guessed, it was Sofia Zhukova, her neighbor. Investigators promptly questioned the pensioner, who confidently declared her friendship with the missing girl. Their interaction, according to Zhukova, was limited to tea parties, drawing, and harmless conversations, nothing that could raise suspicions. Although, according to Vika's testimony, the pensioner threatened Nastya through the window several times when the children were too noisy and was also the last person seen with the girl. Nevertheless, all these facts turned out to be insignificant for the investigation and eventually faded into the background, as on the eve of the new year, a package with the girl's bones was found at the local landfill, sparking rumors of a maniac in Khabarovsk and causing panic among the locals. Despite the shocking discovery, the culprit was never found, and the investigation reached a dead end, leaving many questions unanswered.
But, as you might guess, that wasn't the end of it.
In March 2013, another incident occurred in Sofia Ivanovna Zhukova's life, which caught the attention of the police. Anastasia Mikhailova, a longtime acquaintance of Zhukova's, decided to change her environment. Having sold her apartment in Khabarovsk, she planned to move to the capital to be with her daughter. However, unexpected delays with documents forced her to temporarily stay homeless, and Zhukova offered her help. A few days after moving in with Zhukova, Mikhailova suddenly disappeared, ceasing to communicate with her relatives. Surprising, isn't it? Concerned, Mikhailova's daughter turned to the police to find her missing mother. Information that Mikhailova was temporarily staying with Zhukova was known to both relatives and the local postman delivering pensions to both women. Upon arriving at the scene, the police found blood traces in Zhukova's apartment, to which she calmly explained. During an argument caused by Mikhailova's unexpected decision to leave to Primorye after receiving her pension, Mikhailova got injured and blood got on the wallpaper and radiators. It seemed blood was there, but the friend wasn't. Everything is obvious, especially if you remember the little girl who also disappeared after visiting the pensioner. But no! The police accepted the story of a bloody conflict, which followed Mikhailova's abrupt change of plans without proper skepticism. Anything can happen, right? Mikhailova's relatives tried to convince the police that Mikhailova had no relatives in Primorye and couldn't have gone there. However, further investigation did not follow. and the case was suspended due to lack of substantial evidence to hold Zhukova accountable. After Mikhail's disappearance, neighbors noticed that Zhukova began to appear in the missing woman's clothes and treat them to meat dishes, which only fueled the dark speculation surrounding this mysterious story.
It wasn't until early 2019 that Sofia Zhukova's fate took a decisive turn.
The catalyst was the disappearance of the 62-year-old janitor, Vasily Shlaktych, who had been renting a corner in her house for 10,000 rubles a month. After a quarrel with his partner on New Year's Eve, Shlaktych turned to Zhukova for temporary shelter, which she agreed to provide. However, on January 28th, the man stopped communicating and didn't show up for work. Soon, he was reported missing, and the investigation led to interrogations of Zhukova, who stubbornly denied his prolonged stay and claimed to have only seen him drinking in the yard by chance. Meanwhile, neighbors told a completely different story. Shlaktych moved in with Zhukova before New Year's, and in the following days, suspicious sounds of muffled blows from floor cleaning were heard from her apartment at night. The morning after Shlaktych's disappearance, Zhukova was seen carrying heavy bags to the garbage. Surprisingly, this time the investigation started suspecting something. Bloody traces were found in her apartment, and blood was also found on tools, including an axe and a saw. Despite all the evidence, Zhukova continued to deny acquaintance with the janitor, explaining the blood in the apartment by an old quarrel with her friend and claiming that she was chopping bones for borscht at night. This time, Zhukova's arguments didn't convince the investigators. The 80-year-old woman was detained despite substantial resistance she offered during the arrest, overpowering 5 police officers. She literally scattered them around the room. They simply didn't expect such agility and strength from a pensioner. After several weeks in isolation, Sofia Zhukova began to open up and give testimony about what happened to Vasily Shlaktych. According to her, on that fateful evening, the janitor came to her accompanied by a friend seeking hospitality and warm tea. However, a simple cozy evening turned into a nightmare when vodka was added to the tea, and the guests, losing control, began to harass the hostess. The old lady wasn't too thrilled about such attention. During the quarrel, which flared up after the friend fled, Zhukova, according to her, was forced to hit Shlaktych with an axe in self-defense. Moreover, traces of old blood belonging to the missing Anastasia Mikhailova were found under the linoleum. Perhaps realizing that she had no chance of freedom anymore, Zhukova began to share details of her crimes with her cellmates. She not only talked about the murder of Shlaktych, but also about the fate of her friend, as well as the horrifying crime against little Nastya Alexeyenko. Whether this was a strategic move by the investigators to put Zhukova in a cell with potential informants, or the cellmates independently passed on her words to law enforcement, remains open. However, the result was clear. Zhukova's confession about all 3 murders became a key moment in the case. Moreover, she really didn't waste the meat, choosing the most tender pieces for herself since she had to butcher her victims anyway. And yes, she really treated her neighbors afterward. And you might wonder, why did she even kill these people? Zhukova saw in each of her victims the culprit of her misfortunes. According to her, Nastya violated the peace, screamed and ran, causing irritation. And on the fateful day, she threw ice cream at the old lady, something the pensioner couldn't forgive. Her friend Anastasia Mikhailova, in Zhukova's opinion, showed arrogance, forgetting about her favors and refusing to share money, not expressing her gratitude for accommodation. Vasily Shlaktych, according to her claims, tried to overstep the bounds of decency, as I mentioned earlier. These accusations put forward by Zhukova were in her eyes sufficient grounds for extreme measures. The trial of Zhukova, which began in August 2019, dragged on for months without a final decision. And then, without waiting for the verdict, Sofia Ivanovna passed away on December 29, 2020, becoming one of the many victims of the virus raging worldwide at that time. The media, in turn, spun the end of this tragic story, presenting information about her alleged posthumous confession of guilt. But reality turned out to be different. Sofia Zhukova was never officially recognized as guilty of committing these horrifying crimes. Almost a month after her death, the case was closed due to her demise, leaving questions of justice and punishment unanswered. And now, another story about a neighbor who loved to treat everyone with unusual dumplings. And yes, he is free now! Mikhail Malyshev was detained with undeniable evidence of his misdeeds. Refrigerators filled with human meat were found in his apartment. With the help of his girlfriend, he lured victims to him, then killed and dismembered them, turning the remains into food. With his horrifying culinary skills, Malyshev found application creating various dishes from the meat of the slain, including dumplings and pies. Now, returning to his native town Perm, he has become the subject of discussion and fear among local residents, fearing a possible repetition of his crimes. His story, once shocking the entire country, has once again become relevant. So, let's figure it out together how Mikhail filled his fridge with specific meat. Born in 1966, Malyshev grew up under the caring gaze of his mother, a teacher, dreaming of a career as a musician. However, a hand injury forced him to abandon this dream. The next blow was his parents' divorce and the birth of a child from his mother's new partner, which was a real psychological blow for Malyshev. His childhood and youth were marred not only by family tragedies, but also by problems in communicating with peers, which led Malyshev to dedicate himself to sports, striving to change his appearance. However, his choice of a protein source for muscle building was more than unusual. He began to kill and eat stray dogs, which led to his registration with the Juvenile Affairs Inspection. After his military service, Malyshev began to lead an antisocial lifestyle, with his apartment becoming a gathering place for drunken parties, while he himself scraped by with odd jobs. His hospitality often included horrifying dishes made from the meat of killed animals, hinting at the depth of his psychological problems. The situation escalated when two neighbors appeared in his life. One of them became the victim of violence. During a quarrel, Malyshev cut off his ear and then ate it. The second neighbor, a young woman, found herself in his apartment against her will, becoming a victim of threats and psychological pressure from Malyshev. What did he threaten her with? He pointed to the shelf in the refrigerator and said she would end up on it if she didn't obey. In September 1999, Mikhail Malyshev decided to add another entertaining element to his gatherings with drinking buddies, a sexual component. He sent his partner to find a girl. She met a student who easily agreed to come over. The girl was raped, and after screams about the police, Mikhail hit her with a metal pipe. Then the body was carefully dissected into pieces. The couple even made minced meat for future cutlets. The head, hands, and other unwanted parts were thrown into the river. The investigation into this case initially led to the conviction of an innocent person who incriminated himself under pressure. The real criminal was caught only after committing another murder in year 2000, when Malyshev, during an argument at a barbecue, killed one of his drinking buddies. And yes, minced meat and preparations were made again. The horrifying living conditions described by investigators in Malyshev's apartment. A place full of garbage with homemade cages and refrigerators filled with human and dog meat. Flies everywhere, garbage, and stinky clothes. I'm telling you, even I involuntarily scrunched my face. Malyshev's confession of the murders and his justifications, referring to cannibalism in other cultures, shocked society. In October 2000, Mikhail was found sane and sentenced to 25 years in prison, which was later reduced to 23 years after an appeal. His story not only led to a review of the case of the wrongfully convicted person, but also raised questions about the work of the law enforcement system and psychiatric expertise.
Do you know how he fared in prison? In correction facility number 10.
His life was far from ordinary. Working as a food deliveryman, he avoided contact with other prisoners and was constantly subjected to disdain for both his appearance and his crimes. According to former cellmates, Malyshev ate an unusually large amount of food and always in solitude, maintaining a lifestyle that disgusted those around him. He didn't wash, wore dirty and smelly clothes, and always emitted an unpleasant odor. Malyshev's return to society, to the very apartment where his horrifying crimes were once committed, sparked outrage among residents of his neighborhood. This is especially true for parents of children who attend school and kindergarten near his home. The local dog owners are also outraged, fearing for the safety of their pets. And I understand these people. It's clear that Malyshev is under administrative supervision to ensure public safety and minimize the risk of repeat offenses. This involves a set of obligations for Malyshev, including mandatory nighttime home stays and weekly visits to the police department. Moreover, the cannibal is subject to additional restrictions. He is prohibited from attending mass events and leaving the Perm Krai. Such measures are intended to control his actions and prevent possible breaches of order. The police have the right to conduct surprise checks at any time, but it's unlikely to reassure his neighbors.
So, be careful and keep an eye on your neighbors. Whether it's a sweet old lady or a young guy, you never know what demons lurk in their minds.
And if you're interested in such stories, you can try yourself as a scriptwriter, editor, or narrator in our team. Write to the Telegram bot via the link in the description. And thanks for watching.